Welcome. Scott here. Here is a quick boss guide for the upcoming LUFENIA Plus event, Intersecting Will's Perfect Size. The featured units are Yuri from Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Gilgamesh from Final Fantasy V, Quistis from Final Fantasy VIII and Iroha from Final Fantasy XI. This raid event also marks the debut of Yuri's LD. We will be fighting the Lich, which has 15 million HP. It can summon 2 skeletons which has 2 million HP. The turn requirement is 80. The HP requirements is 25,000. Before I continue further, here is a small disclaimer clause for the video. The guide is written based on the time that the event was released for the Japanese version. Please do note that it is possible that the boss fight mechanics might differ when the actual event is released in global. Firstly, let's go through the LUFENIA Plus orb conditions. The LUFENIA Plus will activate at the start of the fight at the counter of 10 and it is a non-cancelable orb. The LUFENIA Plus countdown ability isn't a fatal attack. Group Darka Plus is an AoE Brave plus HP attack and it will inflict the Doom debuff for 3 turns on all targets. While Doom debuffs is active, any attack from the boss or minions will inflict break on the target. The orb will reset back to 10 upon trigger. Although the orb count is 10, every action your party take will downtick the orb by 2, so technically it is actually a tight orb. The orb won't tick down the Lich boss acts, but it will downtick by 1 when the skeleton minions act. To uptick the orb you need to deal Holy Brave plus HP damage of at least 200k in 1 turn. On the screen I have listed down the units that could help for the orb. For Holy Elemental attackers, you can consider Yuri, Shantato, Eiko, or Vaughn. Instead of bring Holy Elemental units, you can also consider bring Holy Party enchanters. They are Paladin Cecil, Kuja, and Ash. Now let's proceed with some party setup recommendations. Recommended calls abilities. To ensure that you are able to constantly break them, it is important to inflict defense down debuffs. Example of calls abilities that inflict defense down calls are Ferris, Titus, Jack, and Vanille. As the boss has a huge amount of HP damage up debuff calls like Karasame, Gabrinth, Liliset, Fran, Maria, and Ignis are useful. Although a bit trickier to use, Aura type HP damage up calls like Sid and Kamari are also viable. Most recently C90 units have HP damage up aura in their LDCA. You can use Dissidia DB call finder to find out more. As mentioned in the previous slide, you need to do Holy Elemental 200k damage to uptick the orb. You can consider bringing a Holy Enchant call. Currently only Ash LDCA offers this utility and it lasts for 6 turns. Next, I will be covering units that will be useful to handle the fight mechanics. Like other LUFENIA Plus events, it is always recommended to bring supports for their aura and buffs. They are Garnet, Porum, Setzer, Agrias, Kate Sith, Queen, Ishtala, Bartz, Lena, Lyud, and Sarah. Garnet BT plus support will help to trivialize the fight, that you could finish the fight before you worry about the boss mechanics. When the boss summoned the skeletons at certain HP thresholds, you will be facing a barrage of HP attacks from the skeletons. Damage mitigation is highly recommended. Options include Snow, Core, Gladiolus, Warrior of Light, Beatrix, Orin, Zack, Guy, Prompto, and Kader. As mentioned earlier, you need to do Holy Elemental damage to uptick the orb. You can either use Holy Party enchanters like Kuja, Ash, Paladin Cecil, and bring any damage units of your choice. Greg will be great for the fight when you pair him with a Holy Enchanter. Alternatively, you can bring holy damage units like Yuri, Shantato, Vaughn, Eiko, Sabin, Lion, and Sidor. The boss can inflict a couple of debuffs and Doom debuff is something you will want to avoid when you trigger the orb. Have a debuff evasion unit will negate the effects of Doom. You can use Lena, Selpha, Ignis, Era, or Apma. For Selpha, you may need to use SYLPH summon to ensure you get 100% debuff evasion. If you are doing an ignore orb run without any debuff evasion, having break immunity will also make the fight a lot easier. You can use Ursula and Yang for party-wide break immunity. core can apply break immunity with Oath buff on the target, while Kai's hero support has break immunity on the target. Lock grants everyone immunity to break with his BT aura. Avoid bring turn hoggers for the fight, as the boss unleash Group Darka Plus, a variant that inflict a no brave gain field aura for 3 turns if a unit acts for 5 consecutive actions. On the screen, you will see a timeline showing the HP thresholds triggers that you need to watch out for. The LUFENIA aura and stats boosts are triggered at the start of the fight and 49% HP threshold. At the 69% HP threshold, the boss will buff itself with darkness. After some actions later, it will further buff itself with Calls of Abyss, which usually happens between 55% to 50% from the videos that I have watched. At the start of the fight, you receive a warning message regards to one party unit taking 5 consecutive actions. Avoid triggering it or the consequences will be dire. As mentioned earlier, the boss countdown ability is not fatal. It is an AoE brave attack and inflicts the Doom debuff. Any attacks by the boss and the skeletons who is inflicted with Doom will trigger break. Upon triggering it, the orb will be reset back to 10. The orb is a tight one and you can expect it to trigger frequently if you are not meeting the orb requirements regularly. At the 80%, 50%, and 29%, the Lich will summon its skeleton minions to the fold. The Lich will gain HP immunity and its turns will be framed. The skeleton will always do HP attack on their turns. To remove the stance, you need to destroy the skeletons. Overall, as long you have the tools to handle the mechanics, this shouldn't pose too much difficulty. Going with a full party of BT plus might resulting you killing the boss before it even poses a threat. The fight feature heavily brave gain reductions, while its brave damage reduction is only a paltry 30% at most. If you intend to bring units that relies on brave gains, bring units that have brave gains up aura like Quistis, Horum, or Agrias. You can also deploy units that have brave refund like Bartz or Garnet. Iroha has brave consumption reduction. These mechanics will be very useful for the fight. Now let's proceed with the boss mechanics proper. Like the previous LUFENIA Plus fights, the boss will gain big stats boosts, brave damage, and brave gain reduction auras when you deplete their HP to a certain threshold. The thresholds trigger for this fight is at the start of the fight and 49% HP thresholds. At the start of the fight, it will boost its defense stats by 200%. At 49% HP threshold, it will further boost its defense stats to 300%. The maximum brave damage reduction auras is 30%. The maximum brave gain reduction auras are 90%. The Lich will also buff itself with Darkness Fall on 69% and follow up with Call of the Abyss after a few actions later, which usually occurs between 55% to 50% HP threshold. Call of the Abyss will grant the boss a 2% HP regen buff for 5 turns. As the brave damage reductions is quite paltry, you might be able to handle with the fight without brave damage up debuffs. However, the fight will severely hamper units that rely solely on brave gains. You can minimize the impact by using brave gain supports like Quistis, Horum, or Agrias. Alternatively, you can deploy supports that has brave refund like Garnet or Bartz, or brave consumption reduction like Iroha. As the orb requires you to deal holy elemental damage, bringing an enchanter and inflict holy imperil will allows you to constantly hit for elemental weakness damage, which will further boost your damage output. Now, I will be covering the boss key mechanics in detail. I will be covering the Group Darka HP variant attacks. Let's discuss the first variant, Group Darka Plus. At the start of the fight, you will see the following message prompto: if the same player acts 5 turns in a row with instant turn rate, a powerful attack follows the next player turn. If you trigger the condition, the boss will counter your party with the attack. The attack is a guaranteed hit and inflicts a field effect of no brave gain for 3 boss turns. You can avoid this totally by avoiding a unit accumulating 5 consecutive actions. The next variant is the Group Darka Plus Plus, which is the countdown ability. the ability will unleash an AoE Brave plus HP attack that inflicts Doom. Doom will trigger Break after the afflicted target acts. It will also apply a field effect that any enemy attack will inflict Break if the targeted unit is inflicted with the Doom debuff. To handle the field effect or the Doom debuff, deploy Break immunity auras will prevent the breaks. Examples of units that provide Break immunity are Ursula or Locke with his BT auras. You can also negate the Break effect with a debuff evasion unit like Lena, Selpha, or Aphmau. Next, I will be covering the skeleton summon cycle. At the 80%, 50%, and 29% HP thresholds, the boss will auto-summon 2 skeletons, which has 2 million HP each to the battlefield. Once they are summoned, the Lich boss's turn will become framed. While it is framed, it will gain 999% HP damage immunity. It will also be immune to delay, include breaks, and turn deletion. In other words, you cannot do any HP damage as long as the skeletons are alive. To remove the stance effect, you just need to kill off the skeletons. For units that deal single target, make sure they target the right enemy. The summoned skeletons have 2 million HP each. Upon their turn, they will unleash Bloodsword Plus. Bloodsword Plus is a single target Brave plus HP attack that inflicts Bone Curse debuff for 1 turn. For every action taken by the skeletons, it will downtick the orb by 1. The Bone Curse debuff will reduce the target's speed and turn rate down by 50%. Any HP damage dealt by the unit will be reduced by 100%. So, you need to kill them fast before they become problematic. The Lich can pull the skeleton's turn before its turn with puppetry upon triggering 3 breaks. So do watch out for that. As long as your party remains unbroken, you probably won't see this mechanic happening. This can be dangerous though if your party don't have damage mitigation. Now I have reached the last slide of my boss guide presentation. As usual, there are 2 common approaches to the fight. The most common approach is by deploy a holy party enchanter like Paladin Cecil, Ashe, or Kuja and bring a damage dealer of your choice. Or you can bring a holy damage unit for the fight. As the orb isn't fatal, you can technically do an ignore orb run. Debuff evasion will prevent the doom debuff and thus making the countdown ability pretty much harmless. If you are doing without debuff evasion, you can also go with break immunity. Upkeep your HP or negate their brave gains with freeze debuffs and you will be fine. Overall, this isn't a tough fight as long as you have the tools to handle the mechanics. I have come to the end of my boss guide presentation. Hopefully you find it useful. If you like the video, please give a like. Please subscribe to my channel for future gaming content. Good luck for the fight tomorrow. Bye.